Chapter 2. On the second level, in the royal chamber, the Peppermint King sits on his throne with a lifeless expression as he listens to his council of industrial leaders, or what he calls his sweeties, express their feelings. Your sweetness, the demand is strong and it always will be. The workers, though, are in the midst of a trying time. Many are bedridden at their homes. The workers I do have are the ones I can trust forever. But if this sickness continues, production might be impacted, says Mr. Kane, the head royal product storage. The Peppermint King says nothing and takes a puff on a pipe filled with string sugar that comes from a private stock of rusa plants, a type of plant that once grew wild in the Peppermint Kingdom. Now their chemical essence is mass-produced in laboratories and are infused in many delicious products that are pumped out of the factories. Another member of the Sweeties comes forward, Mr. Lemondrop, head of product research and development. But your sweetness, with all due respect to the workers, they are the least of our worries. We need a strong leadership presence during these trying times. We feel you are infected with the same illness. If you die, who will take your place? That should be an obvious answer for you all, says the king as he calmly puffs on his pipe. Your two princes are barely capable of managing a garden, conjectures a sweetie named Dr. Licorice, head of the Essence Labs. The citizens would lose trust in their leadership and revolt out of fear, says Mr. Kane. I love them so much, but the princes haven't even grown so much as a nub, let alone a tail between their legs. Perpetual babes rutting around for mother's milk, hisses Mrs. Corntart, head of the bakery. The king continues to puff on his pipe and say nothing, while the sweeties speak among each other. After a minute, Mr. Lemondrop comes forward with a plan. Your sweetness, since the princes are identical, why don't we take one of their lungs and replace your damaged lung with a fresh one? The king puts down his pipe and stares deep into Lemondrop's bright yellow eyes. Outside this castle is a river. Do you know its source? I believe so, your sweetness, says the sweetie whose tail wags nervously. In the north, the Muddy Mountain. When I was a young man, my father sent me to the Muddy Mountain to work in the Cleary mines. A tough, harrowing kind of work. He thought it would give me strength, character, and a sense of geography. Most of my days were spent inside narrow, long, dimly lit tunnels, chipping away at the ancient rock with a pickaxe, all for the purpose of collecting these clear mineral deposits. A simple clear rock that is sent all over Hemisia to be melted, refined, and molded into all that you see in our kingdom, even our teeth. Life would be much harder without it. Now, when we were thirsty, we would drink from the river. It was unlike anything I had tasted in my life. The color was golden. It was pure. I was drinking from the source, my sweeties. One day, while I was taking a break and drinking from the source, I thought about the river. I imagined it bubbling out of the rocks, falling down the mountain, weaving through the Bogo and the Peppermint Kingdom, and merging into the Sour Sea, meeting the demands of the people along the way. Just like the Clearys, the river would be altered through the process. After a year in the mines, I came back home, no longer the small-minded Peppermint Prince. I was stronger, had a beard, and I now understood how our world worked. We all start out pure of heart, but with the demands of our society, we become altered. My son shall learn the same lesson. It's a process, my sweeties. You must be patient. Before the sweeties can answer, the door swings open and Gumbo enters. The sight of a very large man in an ill-fitting royal gown sends the room into a stunned silence. Seconds later, the princes spill through the door. Come on, Gumbo. We can't be in here, says Tootsie, grabbing Gumbo's large arm. These princes have delivered us a diseased beast and it's wearing our queen's attire, warns the purple-faced head of security, Mr. Gleiss. Long live the queen, whispers Dr. Licorice to Mr. Gleiss, and they both laugh. The king sighs and motions to Mr. Gleiss, who stops laughing and nods to acknowledge the request. Asper. A large red mass falls and crashes between the king and his sweeties. Gumbo looks up in terror to see 6 more red masses standing upon ornate stone perches, silently waiting like ants on the rim of a sugar bowl. The red mass unfurls itself, revealing a towering knight with piercing blue eyes. Asper, take the guest to the cellar for now, says the yawning king. But Papa, protest the princes. The knight nods to the king, and then gives Gumbo a quick body scan. The knight is a head shorter, but Gumbo is much weaker and allows the knight to grab his arm and yank him out of the chamber. "Tootsie and Carmelo, please come forward," says the king. The two princes move to the center of the chamber and try to not listen to the sweeties' complaints. "Carmelo and Tootsie, you should both know better than to bring unapproved guests within these walls. Your sweetness, this is further proof that the princes don't have our best interests in mind," interrupts Dr. Licorice. The king glares at Dr. Licorice and is then overtaken by a loud coughing fit. "Why are you laughing, Papa?" wonders Tootsie. "He's coughing." "You fool," shouts Mr. Gleiss. The sweeties howl with righteous amusement and yank each other's tails, which is a way the royals show their appreciation for each other. The king is able to stop his coughing and gain enough strength to continue his speech and gesture for the sweeties to be quiet. They reluctantly obey his command. "Now, I am glad you two have joined our meeting when you did. We were just in the middle of discussing this disease, which you two are aware of, right?" "Absolutely, Papa," says the nodding princes. "And you are both aware of how I may have this disease." The two princes pause and check each other's reaction to this shocking update. "Papa, you are ill?" inquires Carmelo, taking a step towards the throne. The sweeties again erupt into laughter and seem pleased to know that the princes are dumber than their wildest imaginations. "How could you not know your papa, the king, was deeply affected by this disease? His gray complexion and constant coughing fits weren't enough clues?" asks a smirking Mr. Gleiss. "They were too busy blowing bubbles and prancing around barefoot in their fancy sweatsuits," adds Dr. Licorice. The sweeties' laughter rises in pitch as the princes' faces turn purple with embarrassment. The king has enough of his sons being chastised by these howling tail-tuggers and slams his pipe on the floor, causing shattered glass to fly in the air. Silence. The sweeties are stunned by his actions and become quiet. "My boys are not for your entertainment. They are of royal blood and will one day rule over you all when I am go." The king coughs violently and sprays royal blood into the crowd, causing the princes and everyone to duck and cover their heads. Mrs. Corntart runs up to the king and pulls out a syringe from a bag. She then opens up his robe to expose the king's bare violet-skinned belly and injects him with it. The entire room is beside itself. The king's head relaxes and his body twitches twice. He then lets out a haunting scream. "It's liquid sugar, right, Dr. Licorice?" asks Mrs. Corntart. "You are correct. It's good stuff," confirms Dr. Licorice. The king, seemingly back to normal, laughs and prompts the sweeties and the princes to engage in a round of laughter as well. They do so, and it relieves the tension in the room. It feels so good to laugh. Now on to the next order of business. "Tootsie and Carmelo, my boys, you will be going on a mission for the Peppermint Kingdom. A mission to find a solution to this dreadful illness. It is affecting the wonderful people that live and work in our kingdom, and of course your loving leader and papa. I have a hunch. The answer is in the Muddy Mountain, a place that is the source of life for the entire continent. More will be discussed at the dinner. This sugar shot will not last much longer and I will be back to my fatigued and sickly state, so you boys will represent me." The king turns to face his sweeties. "I expect you all to give them their due respect and to withhold your complaints when your prince's guest comes to dinner." The sweeties grumble and nod their heads as their tails shift nervously between their legs. The king smiles at the princes and calls for the adjournment of the meeting. "Time for me to get some rest. You all enjoy your feast. From what I have heard, Mrs. Corntart and her little red arts have baked up something quite delicious for you all." The sweeties wait for Mrs. Corntart to lead the king and his princes out of the royal chamber, and then they quickly follow behind them to find their family members, wherever they are, and prepare them for what could be a very nervous dinner. The air in the grand dining hall is sweet with rows of steaming platters bursting with sugar-fried fishmen, candied corn biscuits with fresh yuffie jam, gumdrop pies, Rusa-flavored pipe-shaped cookies, and gallons of peppermint river water. "Mommy, can I have the head of the fishman?" asks the little licorice boy to Mrs. Licorice. "No, son. The head is for Papa. He likes the brain meat the best." The little licorice boy hangs his head and pouts. "Mommy, when I grow up I want to eat a whole fishman." "I am sure you will, son." Mrs. Licorice pats him on the head and gives him some Rusa cookies. These are the king's favorite. Dr. Licorice stares at his son with horror and wonders what his future will hold. Will there even be fishmen in the peppermint river for him to eat? Those peckerbone twits better not fail, whispers Dr. Licorice in his wife's ear. I don't see those poor princes lasting a day in the BOGO, replies Mrs. Licorice, grabbing a gumdrop pie. They better protect themselves. I hear BOGOs like to bite. Our way of life depends on their strong appetites, but those boys might be walking into a meat grinder. They both nod in agreement. My, growing like a sugar cane, says Mr. Gleiss while walking by the Licorice family. Must get it from his big papa. Mr. Gleiss squeezes Dr. Licorice's bicep and winks, causing Dr. Licorice's tail to wag frantically. Mrs. Licorice laughs at the comment, but wonders why her husband's tail is so happy. The red double doors swing open and the smiling princes enter to a royal fanfare. Welcome, princes, says a bowing Mr. Kane. Tootsie looks over his shoulder and gestures to somebody behind the doorway. Gumbo, come on. Gumbo reluctantly enters as the fanfare comes to a sudden halt. Mommy, is that Santa? Asks the little licorice boy with tears running down his face. No, son, says Mrs. Licorice, hiding her son's eyes. This beast should be drowning in the sour sea. Remove him instantly, shouts Mr. Lemon Drop. He's no beast, retorts Tootsie. He's a friend, interrupts Carmelo. The sweeties and their families gasp with disbelief. They can't believe a member of the royal family would keep such company. Friend or not, the king has already made his decision with this thing, says Mr. Gleiss sternly. Where is Asper? I asked him to be here for the dinner. He's coming. We had to persuade him to release Gumbo. He's such a knight, explains Tootsie to looks of disdain and confusion. Carmelo looks into the distance and notices the small window in the far right corner by the kitchen door. Brother, grab a tuffet. I think a picnic would suit Gumbo just as well, yes? Before Gumbo can answer, Carmelo takes him by the hand and rushes past the crowd towards the small window. He opens it and Tootsie places the red tuffet, with its royal insignia of 2 crisscrossing peppermint canes, outside on the whisker grass. Gumbo struggles to fit through the small window, but with a push from Tootsie, he manages to squeeze through and land on the soft pink whisker grass. The warm sun graces his pale skin and a light, cool, sweet-smelling breeze puts Gumbo at ease. He can't believe it. He is finally outside of the nightmare castle. He hasn't felt this comfortable since. Have I ever been comfortable? Wonders Gumbo out loud to himself. He thinks about running away, but to where? His eyes follow the peppermint river and across the rolling cotton candy-colored hills that seem to go on forever. Where am I exactly? Where am I from? Who am I? Here you go, Gumbo, says Carmelo while placing a steaming plate of fishman meat and sweet treats on the windowsill. Gumbo's mind goes blank as he greedily digs in. Now that the strange beast is out of sight, the sweeties and their families resume their chattering as they move from the platters and find their places at the long dining table. The princes are seated at the end, facing the door, near the kitchen, allowing them to keep an eye on their friend. Once everyone is seated, they politely wait for both of the princes to eat their first bite. Carmelo picks up a gumdrop muffin and takes a bite. Mm, very moist and well put together. A job well done, Mrs. Corntart, exclaims Carmelo. Thank you, my prince. We've been experimenting with a lower temperature and longer bake time, replies Mrs. Corntart. Her tail wags with glee at the positive attention. They all applaud as they are now one step closer to eating their own gumdrop muffin. The applause fades and all eyes are now on Tootsie, waiting for him to choose his first bite. Should I try the fishman or the candied corn biscuit with a scrumptious yufufu jam? Wonders Tootsie, raising the biscuit to his mouth, then putting it back on his plate, causing a few of the sweeties to grumble. But the fishman is quite yummy as well. He cuts a piece and raises it to his mouth and quickly places it back on his plate, causing more grumbling. But I want something sweet, like a candied corn biscuit, say the prince while raising the corn biscuit to his mouth, then putting it back on his plate. But maybe a gumdrop muffin is better, right, Carmelo? Mr. Gleiss slams the table. Just eat something. We are starving. Okay, Mr. Gleiss, says Tootsie with a wry smile, taking his first bite into the candied corn biscuit. So good. Everybody can now eat. The sounds of loud lip smacking and swallowing bounce off the dining hall walls. Outside, Gumbo is making different sounds as he rolls and cries in the whiskey grass. He had very much enjoyed the candied corn biscuit and the gumdrop muffin, but the slimy salmon-like fishman was an instant regret. Initially it was sweet, but when the acidic aftertaste kicked in, he began coughing and his eyes turned red and watery. Thinking he could soften the pain with the provided river water, Gumbo took a hurried swig of the crimson liquid and nearly puked. He fell off his tuffet and rolled around the whiskey grass, moaning in pain. His cries could faintly be heard inside the grand dining hall. "Somebody shut that window," demands Mr. Gleiss. The princes shake their heads and wave off the order. "You're right, we need fresh air in this room. Speaking of that, let's discuss the mission the king has given you too. I have spoken to the king, and he says the mission will begin tomorrow. Are you ready?" says Mr. Gleiss. "Tomorrow? Why so soon?" asks Tootsie. "We need some time to prepare," says Carmelo. "Princes, I have received a report from our southernmost guard posts that a large storm is heading north from the Sour Sea. It could break landfall as soon as tomorrow," says Mr. Kane. "My men have packed your bags and have provided you both with all the necessary items you will need. In the morning, you will board the train. It will be a long ride to the Muddy Mountain. There may be a few stops along the way, and you may be asked to help. Do whatever the conductor asks of you. Remember, your royal privilege will only take you so far in the Bogo, and it is a very dangerous place. The king says the Muddy Mountain is the source of our own river and has revitalizing qualities. I have never been there, but you will need to find this source and collect its water and bring it back." "We understand, Mr. Gleiss," say the princes. Suddenly, the large double doors are kicked open and enters Asper. "Where is he? You two turds let him escape from my hands," screams the knight. "Glad you could join us," says Mr. Gleiss, desperate to calm his knight. "I have prepared you a plate." Asper looks around the room and notices that Gumbo is not there. He then glares at his uncle and grabs the plate. He finds an open seat on a large bench by the wall to the left of the window, only breaking his glare at his uncle as he picks up a big fork and begins to feast. Mr. Gleiss clears his throat. "So, Asper, you will be going on a mission to the Muddy Mountains with the princes and their new friend." "What?" blurts out Tootsie in disbelief. "Papa said no such thing, did he?" protests Carmelo. Asper stops eating and stares back at Mr. Gleiss. "What mission is this?" "Oh, the mission to the Muddy Mountain to save the kingdom. You will serve the country by providing them with your protection," explains Mr. Gleiss. Asper shoots to his feet, spilling the contents of his plate onto the floor. "And when was I to be told I was assigned to such a pitiful task?" "Pitiful? These are our peppermint princes. The royal blood courses through them. Helpless as they may be, they are but children," retorts an incredulous Mrs. Corntart, thumping her tail on the ground. "Helpless?" shouts both of the princes. "It's an order!" yells Mr. Gleiss as he bangs his plate on the table and startles the women and children. "I, of course, do graciously accept this task and vow to spread the honor of the Peppermint Kingdom across the Bogo and beyond if I must," concedes Asper, who then turns to the princes. "My princes, though you may be young, I do not doubt the two of you could make this journey on your own, but the Bogo is a strange place and I know it would, at the very least, soothe your father's weakened heart if you allowed me to accompany you." The brothers give a hesitant nod of approval and the sweeties provide a polite round of applause. A large gust of wind blows through the open window and knocks over a tray of cookies. One of Mrs. Corntart's workers rushes to clean up the spill. "Should I close this window?" asks Asper, who stands up and walks towards the window. The princes realize what is about to happen and try to distract him by throwing gumdrop muffins, which miss and hit the wall, leaving 2 yellow splotches. Asper looks out the window and he recognizes Gumbo, who, at this moment, is climbing onto his tuffet. "Hello, bitch." Asper leaps through the window tackling Gumbo, and they roll down the peppermint hill together, looking like a cinnamon Danish. The sweeties attempt to calm down their disturbed family members as the princes stand up and run to the window. "Mr. Gleiss, your nephew and Gumbo seem to have become good friends during their time together, and now they are rolling down the hill," hand to throat. "Please do something about this," demands Tootsie. Carmelo shakes his head and jumps out the window to chase after the rolling ball of flesh. Tootsie feels compelled to join him. "Release Gumbo or I will have you thrown into the grease pits," yells Carmelo. Unfortunately, Gumbo and Asper can't hear him, due to the water entering their ears as they splash into the Peppermint River. Its acidic quality removes the top layer of Gumbo's exposed skin and causes a pulsating pain throughout his body. Gumbo punches and kicks in an all-out fight against the water and the attacking knight. Asper then groans and releases Gumbo, allowing them both to rise for air. As they pop their heads to the surface, gasping and coughing, they are greeted by the princes, Mr. Gleiss and 4 other knights. "Hello, having fun? It's dangerous to swim on a full stomach. Help these 2 water bugs out of the river," commands Mr. Gleiss. The 4 knights step into the river and drag out Gumbo and Asper. Gumbo's skin and hair is now stained a bright violet, matching everyone else's skin. "Oh my, the caterpillar is becoming a butterfly before our very own eyes," says Mr. Gleiss, who then takes out a circular mirror and shows it to Gumbo. He shudders as the puffy-faced bearded man with bright violet skin and hair stares back at him. "Is that what I look like? Am I really a monster?" Gumbo says, not believing his own eyes. Everyone has a good laugh at Gumbo's expense, and even Gumbo can't help but laugh. He thinks it's nice to finally feel something other than pain. The laughter lasts for a few moments, leaving everyone in a good mental state. "My princes, I am sorry for my outburst. I have trouble with my emotions," says Asper. "We accept your apology. Now, Gumbo will be accompanying us on this mission, so you will also be responsible for his protection, understood?" says Tootsie. "As you wish, my sweetness," says Asper on his knees and bowing his head. The cold wind blows at their backs while they walk up the hill towards the castle. Gumbo shivers and stares at his changed skin. Carmelo is behind him and gives Gumbo a playful poke in his ribs. "I'm afraid it's permanent. We all go through it, my friend. You'll get used to it. Did you like the biscuits?" Gumbo nods and pats his belly. "I'll grab you some more. We have a big day tomorrow and we should get some rest." The prince's chamber is a large room with 2 large windows, above 2 large beds on each side of the room, with a fireplace in the middle. In front of the fireplace is Gumbo, chomping on candied corn biscuits. The princes are on their beds, settling in for their last night before the big journey. It isn't long before Gumbo is lulled to sleep by the sound of the crackling fire and a full belly, followed by Tootsie, who whimpers with excitement for the journey ahead. Carmelo lays awake whimpering with horror, fantasizing about what awaits them beyond the border of the Peppermint Kingdom. Then he remembers that Papa once journeyed beyond the kingdom. Maybe he can help me be brave? Carmelo climbs out of bed, tiptoes out of his room, and walks down a few long hallways to the king's chamber. "Papa, Papa," whispers Carmelo as he kneels by his father's bed. "Yes? What?" "Ah, Carmelo, what is it, my dear son? You should be sleeping. They speak of a great storm, so you must leave at first light," says the king with a weak voice, then coughs loudly. "I just need to know how you stayed brave when you left the kingdom. You know, when you were a prince?" The king laughs and sits up in bed. "Carmelo, you remind me so much of myself. You see, back when your grandfather told me I was going to the Muddy Mountain, I was initially terrified. For days, I cried and wandered the hills. I've never seen you cry. You were strong," says a wide-eyed Carmelo. "That's because I am the king. We need to be strong. A peppermint prince must learn how to be strong. Under my bed is a small wooden box. Please hand it to me." Carmelo reaches under the bed and pulls out a heavy old box labeled Mortis. "What's in the box, Papa?" asks Carmelo, handing the box to the king. While wandering the hills, a man dressed in a white cloak crawled out of a hole in the ground. I normally would have run from such a person, but I was weakened by hunger and sadness. He brought me into his underground lair and introduced me to his Tang gang. They all recognized me as a peppermint prince and wondered how I could be so sad and dirty. I told them about my given mission and how I felt scared about leaving the kingdom. The man in the white cloak said he could sell me an item that would not only keep me safe, but make me brave. An item of great magic. Carmelo nods enthusiastically, desperately wanting to know the contents of the box. Of course, I didn't have access to the kingdom's wealth out there. In fact, after a few days, I didn't even have a gumdrop left. I was starving. But the kind white-cloaked man only wanted 2 clearies, and so I allowed him to rip them out of my mouth. The king smiles and reveals a scarred lump of flesh, causing the young prince to recoil. Now, this item is dangerous. I am trusting you and you alone. You're the one that will need it the most. You cannot tell your brother about this, or anyone else for that matter, especially Asper. Is this understood? Carmelo nods. Open the box, Papa. The king smiles and lifts the lid of the box, revealing an odd-looking contraption about the size of a large hand. Carmelo pokes it. Ooh, Papa, it's cold. Yes, Carmelo, this is called a gun.